All right. History lesson. We're gonna go with the I guess a summation of America, beginning with the Revolutionary War, ending in the apocalypse, which should have zombies run around within the next 5 years. Today is 1/10/2020. So, it goes like this. Like, the real reason the Revolutionary War happened, like, is that it was three major factors. That was Washington, like the ones y'all know about. We'll start with the ones you know about. It was the 1% tax on tea, I believe, which caused the Boston Tea Party. The treatment of women and children by British soldiers, basically like coups, organized gang rapes, prima nocturne, all these like rapist ideologies that were perpetuated by British soldiers back then. Some of which was still happening today, but it's all like they try to hide it as pornography, but it's like demonic perversion, occult paganism type shit. But the real reason the Revolutionary War started was Washington went to England and was like, why doesn't the Magna Carta apply to the colonies? I believe it should apply to the colonies. And they were like, well, we can't do that because then we have to pay them people, and then we got to acknowledge black people and Indians and all the other people we slave trafficking, because the Magna Carta only applied to the formal island of Great Britain or England. So they were still, at the time, they were still human trafficking Irish and Chinese and African people and Muslims. They're just they were human trafficking any place it wasn't England proper. Like, the colonies didn't have the benefit of Magna Carta. Like, y'all didn't know that, but now y'all know. So Washington went there and was like briefly before, combat started in the 1700s. Washington was like, "Yo, let's free everybody and make the Magna Carta. So let's make Magna Carta legit to apply to everybody in the colonies." And he was like, "Nah, we can't do that. We making too much money off the slaves and the cotton and all these plantations we got all over the place. And, the slaves maintain our market. And if we, make them our equals, they're going to be a revolt and they're going to be mad and they're going to be subjects." And so Washington came back and was like, "Fuck that shit. I'm going to start a war." And his plan was to install the Ten Commandments in the Constitution. And I know y'all are like, we washed, slaves and bought slaves. Not as many of y'all think. He inherited a couple and he bought a couple. But he trained his slaves as generals and soldiers. Serious, real talk. But, like, the plantation owners cock blocked what he was trying to do by adding the Ten Commandments to the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution. And that set us back like 300 years. Like, to this day, I'm still dealing with racist crackers all over the place. Like they functionally Nazis, and it pissed me off. But if y'all look it up, Washington's Constitution version of the Declaration of Independence declared the Ten Commandments as a part of that, and the rest of the plantation owners in the South and various other people that didn't think brothers were human or Chinese were human or Irish were human. Remember, this country was also, and another reason this country was created was for religious freedom. But, they were all Protestants, different sects, sects of Protestants. So, this makes the situation immensely complicated for everything between the Revolution and the Civil War. But basically everything between the Revolution and the Civil War. Keep in mind, each one of these wars were funded. Like, the United States was self-funded, and we didn't have anybody on our side. Like during the Revolutionary War, and the Revolutionary War included the French, the British, the Spanish, and you got to keep in mind, the British just recently got over their affiliation with the Vatican and the Holy See and the Holy Roman Empire. But, the French and the Spaniards still had kings back then. So, keep in mind, the French were fighting us. The Indians were fighting us. Some of the Indians were fighting us. A lot of the British people didn't have beef with the Indians. But, so we were fighting the French on one side, the Spanish on one side. The Vatican, the actual Vatican funded England. They kind of forgave England their quote unquote religious treachery, like exact words by the Pope concerning the King James Bible and stuff. So we fought the Vatican in the form of Rome, in the form of Spain, and in the form of the French. A lot of people don't know we were fighting all of them at the same time with the British. So there was that, and we fucked them all up, became the United States. But we had slavery, so we weren't like the real United States. We were just the pre-Union, which, in my opinion, included way too many slave owners and assholes. Like, people that think brothers not human. And Chinese people not human, and Indian not human. And basically all the people they were trafficking through the Bermuda Triangle and the slave trade triangle. I still think the Bermuda Triangle is caused by, the brothers and sisters that were lost, like sinking boats. And you never hear about a brother being on the ocean and sinking in the Bermuda Triangle. It's always a bunch of racist crackers. Found out. Maybe it's UFOs too, but we'll get into that too. Did y'all know Washington saw some UFOs and aliens and shit? Real talk. It's in his notebooks. What was I going to say? Oh, yeah. So we fought the French, the Spanish, and the British, and we fucked them all up. And then Washington tried to make the Constitution have the Ten Commandments and the plantation owners and, the quote-unquote Americans. I don't think they were real Americans, because Americans believe in equality. Keep in mind, women didn't have the right to vote, and they were part of that 3/5 rule. Slaves were part of that 3/5 rule. And to this day, it still fucks up our elections. So we fucked up the French, we fucked up the Spanish, and the 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 Native Americans that were fighting us. Yeah, there were a lot of atrocities occurred, like before now, like to this day, still a lot of atrocities still occur. But God will fix it eventually. You know the politicians won't. God will. But yeah. I'm just sad. You gotta give me a moment. I'm trying to shake some tears. Alright. Let's fast forward to the Civil War. There's this dude right before the Civil War that grew up in Illinois. And his name was Lincoln. He was a self-educated man that liked to wrestle and read probably every book that he ever got his hands on that was nonfiction, and probably every book that was fiction too. Abraham Lincoln. Go figure, another Abraham person in history that was a good man. Is a good man. But this dude's rise to fame as a lawyer, like he was a self-taught lawyer back before all the weird shit that, you know, all the weird illegal taxations that occur. Like he was up in a log cabin that he turned into a library, and it was basically just a library that, you know, had a place where he could eat and sleep. Sounds like heaven, you know. It's actually pretty cool. But he's self-educated. He was a wrestler. Very morally strict man. Monogamous. And, you know, he eventually runs for office and gets elected. Like, just like right before the Civil War happened. So, like, he's like doing his thing, and this dude believes in equality. Like, you know, he had some black friends, probably had some Asian friends. Like, just had friends all over the place. He was a good man, and like, had some white friends. You know, just he was a good dude. Excellent facial hair, and like he gets invited. This is when, before the Civil War, after he gets elected, he gets invited down to a plantation. And a lot of people don't know the story, but it's a fucked up story. Like, Lincoln gets elected and goes down this plantation. And at this plantation, there's like three or four kinds. There's like three kinds of meat, and like one really fucked up thing that ain't ever gonna be meat. He's down there, and like it's like winter time, and like they got beef, and they got chicken. It probably has some like lamb or goat, and then they offer him something called the buck. And like Lincoln is like a country, like he's a president, but he's like a country bumpkin, like backwoods hillbilly from Illinois. If y'all ever met a hillbilly, like it's not all Chicago and Illinois. Like there's hillbillies in Illinois. There's also pyramids, but that's like really old. But Lincoln's sitting there chilling, and like he's at this plantation place. They offer him chicken, goat, and beef, and they offer him something called a buck, and like he's sitting there going like, what the fuck is a buck? And he's like, well, gentlemen, what is a buck? They're like, oh, that's the slave that we raised to eat. Lincoln's like, what the fuck? You know, in his head, he's not even morally twisted. He goes, excuse me, I have business to attend to in Washington. I forgot something. Immediately cruises back up north to Washington, ends up at the White House, and it's like, I'm declaring war on the fucking Confederacy. I'm not willing to, have any dealings with fucking cannibals. And that's why the Civil War started. People will tell you other things, but Lincoln was so heavily offended by them offering a slave that was bred and raised to be eaten at a plantation owner's dinner. Like they offered him a slave to eat. You know what he did? Fucking destroyed everything they stood for. That's what the fuck happened. Lincoln was a good man. He didn't eat no buck. He was offended by it. He probably, I think he puked probably. Between 6 and 8 times on the travels between that particular, just thinking about it. Like they offered him a buck and he destroyed the fucking Confederacy. And keep in mind, the Confederacy was once again funded by, we fought the French, fought the Spaniards, the Portuguese, like all the slave owners, like all the Swede countries, all the white people up north, the Vikings, they were all slave traffickers, like the Swedens, the Norways, Portugal, Spain, France, like we fought all those fucking assholes. But that's the real reason that Lincoln, fucked up the South. I bet y'all didn't know plantation owners ate their slaves. And all those supposedly innocent Southern belles, like, they were cannibals, bro. That ain't a myth. That's why the Civil War started. Like, the Confederates were all fucking cannibals. Sure. Fuck them. They in hell. Anyways, that once again was funded by the Vatican and all the particular countries that didn't, like, the Vatican still to this day hasn't outlawed slavery. Serious. Y'all should look it up. And then, so Lincoln won the war, and the sadness. He ended up passing because some cannibal thought it was a right to eat slaves, shot him in the head. And after the Civil War, there was the pre-Nazi, the pre-Nazi still Vatican Holy Roman Empire with all the royals fighting each other. The Mongols in between that time almost took over Europe. Somewhere in between there. Might have happened like 1,000 years before. I'm not sure about the Mongols, but I want y'all to know that the Mongols almost conquered Europe. Had it not been for like a death in the Mongol family, they would have, everybody be looking way more Asian now, as far as the white people are concerned. But yeah, did you know the Mongols had religious freedom? They were also a democracy. People did not know that. This isn't about the Mongols, this is about America. So like, there was the first and the second and the third Reichs that occurred in the 1900s, and this is, in between, I guess, well, we bought some land off the French and the Spaniards, Louisiana Purchase, and then what we purchased off the Spaniards was Florida, New Mexico, Texas, California, and Arizona. Basically the whole West Coast. And then I think we got Oregon and Washington off the Canadians, like the British or the French. I don't know if they still at war or not. But we ended up buying Alaska from the Russians. I mean, huge land grab. I mean, like, it's like half the size of the country. People don't realize how big Alaska is. When you factor in the islands and shit, it's literally like one half to like 70% the size of this country. It's a huge chunk of land. Downside, like most Russian places, is cold as fuck and underdeveloped. But there is oil there, but everybody's like, well, we need to save the elk and the deer and the blah, 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 blah. Canadian snow, they're fucking Canadian geese. Just, serve them for Thanksgiving when you can't find a turkey. All they do is like poop on cars. Most of y'all like cars, right? Y'all have cars. Not everybody has cars. Some of us are very poor. But, yeah. These are just estimations or summations of what occurred. Anyways, you had the First, Second, and Third Reich, which occurred between, I believe, and they say the Reichs are actually governments, like the Nazis. I hate Nazis. I hate Nazis. I hate racists. I hate anti-Semites, like anti-Protestant, anti-conservative Muslims. Like, I hate evil. I hate anti-Buddhists. Like, anybody that's mean to nice people are fucking assholes, and they're probably gonna be destroyed by God. So, anyways, you have the 1900s roll around and World War I pops up, and it's basically us and the Brits against Europe. Basically, like the Austrian, Hungarian, Russian, all the feudal royalties were what we were fighting. It was like the end of the Catholic Vatican feudal system. It's after, like, we essentially freed Europe from like the Vatican royalty agenda. If y'all know what I'm saying. Anyways, and then somewhere towards the end of World War One, Hitler went to Vienna, met up with there was a group of there was like a committee that was like in Vienna. Hitler went there to be an artist, and he failed miserably, like most sociopaths do with everything. Like, he's probably a serial killer in Vienna, too. Everybody knows Hitler was a cannibal and a vampire. I guarantee you Hitler was a fucking real vampire, like a demon. But there was this group of people that was in Vienna at the same time that Hitler was in Vienna. That's where Hitler went to be an artist. He was a Nazi hippie before he became a full-blown Nazi. But let's see who all. I'm trying to think who was in. I figured this out a while back, but it was like Hitler, Stalin, Mussolini, and there are a couple other like weird psychiatric Nazis that were there like around the time of the end of World War One. Keep in mind, Hitler's parents got. Sorry, I got something in my belly. Hitler's parents were Catholic, both of them. Around the time he was in Vienna, he became a failure at art, and then he didn't have any money to get home to, pre-Nazi Germany and eventually Nazi Germany. So he became Swiss Guard, like the Pope paid Hitler to become essentially an assassin and one of his protectors, which is what the Swiss Guard is. Y'all got that? Hitler was Swiss Guard. And now in Vienna, he met this dude called Mussolini. Mussolini was already like a Swiss Guard, and you know, the Pope actually caused the marking of Germany so that Hitler could come into power. He went back to Germany and became a cop. A lot of people didn't know Hitler was a cop in Germany. That's why he dressed like a fag. He was a fag. He was a cannibalistic vampire, demon faggot. Like, he was just evil. But he was a cop, too. I know y'all like euphemism, right? But, like, the Pope funded Hitler's political format and marked Germany for the Protestant Reformation occurring in Germany. Like, the Pope always perceives himself as eternal. So, like, or the Vatican does, perceives themselves as eternal. They don't see themselves getting destroyed. But, like, that was revenge on Germany. Hitler was a revenge on the German people, the Protestants. And now forever, Germany is tied as Nazis. Like, all their descendants will be Nazis. They're just all Nazis. So, Stalin ended up, like, all these guys became Swiss Guard or Opus Dei or something at the same time. Stalin went back to Russia. And then Hitler went back to Germany and Mussolini went back to Italy. Mussolini became the Black Pope. And Stalin became like the Black Pope of the Greek Orthodox Church. A lot of people don't realize the Roman Empire split in half between Constantinople, which is Moscow, and Rome. And like, the two empires always had one ruling faction. And you got to keep in mind, like, you got to factor in all throughout this history, like, since this is like a reminder of weird American things, like, I'm just letting y'all know what our enemies were. But at the time, at the peak of the vampire population of the world, and this isn't a type of person, I'm talking like Vlad Dracula vampires, like, there were three pits at the peak of World War II. One was Transylvania, which was the USSR. There was one in France, and Berlin ended up becoming a vampire pit. And so there were four during World War II. One was Kansas City, and the Kansas City one, and they're all right around 1,000 years old. But the vampire population of the world was at its peak during the flood. During World War II, there was about 72 million vampires worldwide, and like, most of the time, these pits got along. The vampire pit's like the biggest group of vampires. So there were four pits. There was the French one, and there was a French one. There was the Transylvania one, which ended up becoming the biggest one, the USSR. Hitler himself became a demon. He sold his soul for power, and so I think there were five at the time. Yeah, there was. Because there was the prostitute district between formal Rome and the Roman harbor. So there was the Roman vampire pit. There was the Transylvania vampire pit. There was the French vampire pit. There was the German vampire pit. Like, basically boiled down to Transylvania, Rome, Berlin, probably someplace around Paris, and then the Kansas City vampire pit. And and during World War II, like World War One, United States won, and we established a presence in Europe. This is back when people acknowledged vampires, but not only acknowledged but knew they were real. The U.S. Army has always known vampires are real. And then World War II happened, and like there was probably a Japanese vampire pit too. I don't know where the fuck it was, but you know how samurais are. They always commit suicide for dishonor and shit. And samurais were just cops of their particular thing. Like, a lot of people don't realize the cops were bad guys during World War II. If you look in the Constitution, you'll never see the word cop or sheriff. A sheriff is a British agent, like Sheriff of Nottingham. They were essentially advocators of Sharia law under British royalty. In America, they're pretty much no different. Cops, well, stems from the word capo or Confederative Operative Post Surrender. It depends on how you want to look at it. But capo is a rank in the Roman army. And like if you look at the police, most of the police are Vatican. Like in urban environments and shit. They're actually invading us. Like they want to say World War One and World War Two, and it really didn't. And like the Confederates still argue things like states' rights and the Three-Fifths Rule, which basically negates the election of duly elected presidents. Like right now, like if you look at the Constitution, it says the individual that wins the popular vote is the vice president. You know who won the popular vote? Hillary Clinton. Like, I can go get my legal dictionary right now and show y'all. Like, just so you know, y'all know I'm not from. Let me. Where's my legal dictionary at? Excuse me. I got a Webster's legal dictionary right here. Let's see, Constitution real quick. Constitution of the United States. Let's see. Page, it's in the 620s. Give me a second. It goes Congress first. An article here. Let me. It's in Article 2. Article 2. The executive power shall be vested by a President of the United States of America. He shall hold his office for a term of 4 years, and together with the Vice President chosen for the same term be elected as follows. Let's see. Let's see. It says, but in choosing the president, the votes shall be taken by the states. The representation from each state hearing having one vote, a quorum of for this purpose shall consist of a member or members from 2/3 of the states. Oh, that was scary as fuck. Dear. Real new. Somewhere in here it says there's supposed to be that the vice president is the winner, whereas is the receiver of the majority of the popular vote. But where's this at, man? Give me a second. It's in there. It's in Article 2. I believe it's in Section 1. Feel new. In every case, after the choice of president, the person having the greatest number of votes of the electors shall be the vice president. But if there should remain two or more that have equal votes, the Senate shall choose them by ballot, the vice president. But it says, and the majority of all said in every case, after the choice of the president, the person having the greatest number of votes of the electors shall be the vice president. Dude. See what I'm saying? There were only 2 people running for president. So that's like we don't elect vice presidents. The person with the second amount of see what I'm saying? Like so there were only 2 people. Yes, there were only 2 people running for president. Like there is no election for vice president. Vice president is literally established by the person with the second amount of votes. It says it right there. What is y'all's confusion about the subject? Like, if they change in Article 2, that means they are guilty of an Article 2 treason against the United States. So, like, Pence isn't the vice president. Like, there were only 2 people running for office. Like, the presidency, that was Bill and Hillary. Or, I'm sorry, not Bill and Hillary. Trump and Hillary. So the vice president is literally Hillary because they were the only 2 presidential candidates. Duh. Like, we don't elect the vice president. The vice president is literally the person that comes in second place. Like, it says it right there in Article 2. I don't know what y'all's confusion is. But, anyways. So their treachery is immense. Anyways, we get involved in World War II after we find out there are Holocaust camps. And after the British ask us for help. And after Pearl Harbor. And then we proceed to go fuck everything up, build a whole bunch of bases in Europe, and give half of Europe to the USSR. there. And then after that, everything went wrong. I mean, we fucked up Hitler, we fucked up Mussolini, and we fucked up Japan. But then the Pope didn't surrender, even though he created Mussolini and Hitler. Mussolini was the black Pope for Rome, and I guess Constantinople like fought Rome too. Maybe they weren't fighting Rome. I don't know. Like, all I know is we ended up in a Cold War. Like, nobody's ever defined the Cold War to me other than like a conflict with the USSR. I fucked that shit up. Serious, personally. I cleaned up all the fucking tourism issues and destroyed the USSR's ability to fight us back. That's why they don't exist anymore. But y'all don't believe that. So but yeah, that's basically human history or American history till now. Like, there's one race in America, right? That's we the people. That's right. That's right. Which now includes women and children. Because somewhere along between the first of the 19th century and the first of the 20th century, women got the right to vote. So they's now people too. Found out. Unless you count when Republicans win elections most recently. In which case they're 3/5 of a person. They disgrace Lincoln. Like, the last good Republican was John McCain. God bless his soul. He was a Marine. Did y'all know John McCain was a Marine? Don't. Like, what we have now is modern FUBAR scenarios. Like, it's the apocalypse. We don't even elect people by democracy. We elect them by the 3/5 slave and subhumanization of slave and women. Back then, that was the same shit too. Like, found out. This says change right here, by the way. When happy, I still want to cry every time I think about Barack getting elected 2 times. Like, duly elected. He won a popular vote and the Electoral College vote. Republicans can only win 50% of that, and they typically win the Electoral College vote, not the popular vote. Fair deal. But a lot of people don't acknowledge World War II didn't end because the Pope didn't surrender. The Pope, like, if you guys go online, you'll see, like, literally millions of pictures of the Pope shaking hands, the Pope at the time, shaking hands with Hitler and Mussolini. You won't find one where he's shaking hands with, like, an old war dog from Britain. What was his name? Winston Churchill. And then, you never find him, like, shaking hands with, like, Winston Churchill and, like, Roosevelt. You just won't see that. The Pope's like the bad guy from World War I and World War II. And then, like, you got to factor in Mecca was rolling with the Pope during World War II and World War I. Like, one of these days, I'll put out a Middle East video, and y'all can look at it from, like, a reflection of what reality is versus what the history books say. It's, like, sad. God bless the Rockefellers, though. Yeah. Anyways, I'll see you guys later. Enjoy the video. That's the rundown. Don't forget the 5 vampire pit thing. There was one in Transylvania, which was the USSR. There was one in France. There was one in Berlin. There was one in Rome. There was one in Japan. And then, oh, I guess there was six. And then there was one in Kansas City. I'm serious. Their number was around, I think, at an all-time high since the flood of Noah, was 72 million. That was around World War II. The only one that I know that's left is the one in Kansas City. And the government doesn't want to do anything about it because they're fucking retarded. I don't, are duly elected. They're not even duly elected. Like, there's a fucking vampire pit in Kansas. Like, if you possess people, you're literally a fucking vampire. Like, if you actually project into other people's body, I can prove it too. Like, your body, like the second you possess, like just straight, like do it at home. If you're watching this video, like, I can't believe this asshole's like not explaining why I'm a sociopath is euphemism for fucking vampire. Remember that. Like Carl Jung, the shadow, and like the collective unconsciousness. Here's another way you can tell you're a vampire. If your dreams occur in somebody else's body, yeah, check this out. The body only works when your own soul, like, you know how like if you type in a password and it isn't the right password, your computer won't unlock. Well, your soul is like a password for your own body. So if your soul is out of your own body, then rigor mortis sets in. That's where cancer comes from. That's where heart disease and strokes and all this other stuff comes from. I'm about to have like horrible. I've got to utilize the facilities. So like, if you possess people, you're actually a vampire. I don't care to hear your arguments otherwise, but you are a vampire if you possess people. I don't care what age you are. Like if you were a fetus that possesses other people, you're a vampire. If you were a 90-year-old person, you're a vampire if you possess people. Like, human beings do not possess each other. God gives us one soul and one body, and the body only works correctly when our own souls are in our own bodies. Or, like, if my soul is in my body, which it has been my entire existence, then my body works. But if you are in my body, then you a demon, like specifically a vampire. I'm serious. I'll prove it in a later video. But like, in the meantime, strap yourself up to a heart monitor, like one that goes boop when you possess people. I'm sorry, when your soul and your body separate. Like, serious. Strap yourself, like one of the fancy ones that goes, is like boop, 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 like for each heartbeat. When you possess somebody, your heart rate will go to 0. Now, this is how you know you're the living dead. Like, when your soul separates from your body, and then it's a demonic soul, but like, when your soul separates from your body, which is a demonic body, because you're all rigor mortis and shit. When your soul possesses your body, after you possess somebody else's body with your soul, think about this. Like, what revives you? Like, your soul goes back into your body, but like, how does your heart start again? If you ask a paramedic, one of the hardest things to do is restart a heart. They'll give you an exact measurement in joules of how much energy it takes to restart a heart. Your heart literally stops. All your neurological functions end when your soul leaves your body. So, like, if you possess other people, you're literally the living dead. Otherwise, I'm only flicking off the the vampires. Like, if you possess other people, you're a fucking vampire. Like Hitler, like Mussolini, Stalin, all those assholes. They were all vampires. You just like them, except you have less talent, you're less intelligent, and it's the apocalypse, which means all evil leaves this earth, and only the innocent will survive.